The palace of the Zitherian Empire floated like a jewel above the swirling gases of Zorath Prime. Its tall spires gleamed under the light of the twin suns, and the air shimmered with hovering transport pods and sparkling communication streams. Inside, the halls were alive with whispers. Today was unusual. Today, something had arrived that stirred both curiosity and fear in the hearts of the Empire's citizens. Princess Auralia moved silently through the grand corridor. Her long, silvery hair reflected the light from the floating crystal orbs along the walls. Normally, the palace was her world, familiar and predictable. But today, she felt a tension she could not shake. Servants hurried past her, faces pale and voices tight. Even the guards seemed uneasy. "Princess," one servant said softly, bowing. "The Emperor has called for you." "The human warrior has arrived." Auralia froze. Her hand brushed against the smooth wall as she took a deep breath. Humans. She hated the word. She had tried to forget, tried to bury the memories, but they always returned when she heard their name. She remembered the scorching deserts, the fire, and the screams. The humans had seemed unstoppable, cruel in ways she could not comprehend. Her own people had barely survived encounters with them. And now, one had come to her palace. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not him, father." "Not here, not now." The words escaped before she could stop them, but they were not just a protest. They were fear, deep shaking fear, fear she had hidden for years. Yet in the face of the Emperor's decision, her voice trembled like the first wind before a storm. "Auralia." Her father's voice boomed through the palace intercom. Emperor Veyron's presence was always commanding, even in the corridors. "You will attend the ceremony." "The human warrior is here at my request." "His deeds are known across the galaxy. Your place is beside me." Auralia's stomach twisted. Her father was known for his calm, measured words, but today his voice carried an unmistakable firmness. She had no choice. But the thought of facing a human again, it made her chest tighten and her hands clammy. She hurried to the ceremonial hall, her mind racing. Guards bowed and stepped aside as she passed, but their eyes reflected the same tension she felt. Word of the human's arrival had spread fast. Even the nobles, always poised and proud, whispered in corners. The hall itself was breathtaking. High ceilings stretched endlessly, decorated with banners of the Empire's victories. Crystalline chandeliers hovered mid-air, casting prismatic light across the polished floor. And at the far end, standing calmly on a raised platform, was Kale. He was human. Not like the monsters of her memories. He was tall, with broad shoulders and hair that caught the light. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and his stance was relaxed yet ready. Unlike her memories of humans rushing to destroy, Kale's movements were deliberate, careful, and respectful. He did not raise his voice and he did not challenge anyone. Yet the power in his presence was undeniable. The Emperor stepped forward, his voice echoing through the hall. "This warrior has achieved what few can dream. He has defended entire worlds from destruction, and he has come here willingly to offer aid and friendship to the Zitherian Empire." The nobles murmured among themselves, impressed and cautious. The human's reputation was legendary, but no one had ever seen one so close. Auralia's eyes never left him, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to run. Her mind replayed old memories. Human soldiers in battle, their strange weapons, their speed, their unpredictability. She had always believed they were mindless warriors, creatures who destroyed without thought. But Kyle looked different. The Emperor's gaze turned to her. "Auralia, approach him. Show the courtesy of a princess." Her legs felt heavy. Every step was a battle against her fear. Each footfall echoed in the vast hall. She wanted to turn back, to disappear into the shadows. But she did not yet. Her father was watching, the court was watching, and she could not show weakness. As she approached, Kale bowed slightly, just enough to show respect, not submission. His voice, calm and even, reached her ears. "Princess Auralia, it is an honor to meet you." The words were simple, polite, yet something in them made her pause. He did not brag about his victories. He did not boast of strength or power. There was no arrogance, only respect. For a moment her fear wavered, replaced by confusion. Could humans be honorable? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted at the far end of the hall. One of the servants had tripped, spilling a floating data tablet. It crashed to the floor with a sharp crack. The room froze. All eyes turned to the small accident, and in that moment Kale moved. With lightning speed, he leapt forward and caught the tablet before it shattered completely. The princess gasped. He had moved so fast, yet so carefully, his hand steady, controlled. It was not the reckless violence of her memories. It was skill, precision, and protection. Auralia's heart pounded. Her fear was not gone, but it shifted. The human warrior was not the monster she had imagined. He was something else. Something impressive. The Emperor's voice broke through her thoughts. Kale, you have shown wisdom and care. That is the mark of a true warrior, not only strength. Kyle inclined his head. I only act to prevent harm where I can, Emperor. I do not seek glory. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. Auralia felt her chest tighten. She wanted to speak, to challenge him, to demand proof that he was not like the others, but no words came. After the ceremony, the princess was escorted back to her private chambers. She leaned against the cool wall, trying to calm her racing heart. Fear had brought her here, yes, but curiosity, perhaps even admiration, had begun to bloom. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished surface of the wall. Was she afraid of the human? Or was she afraid of what she might feel if she saw him for what he truly was? The palace was quiet now, but outside the winds of change had begun to stir. Kale's arrival was more than a simple visit. It was a test, a challenge to everything Auralia had believed, and deep inside she knew that her life, and perhaps the fate of her empire, would not remain the same. As the twin suns set over Zorath Prime, casting long shadows across the palace spires, Auralia sat by her window. The gases below glowed with shifting colors, beautiful and dangerous. Her thoughts returned to the human warrior. She had seen him for only a short time, yet the image of his calm strength, his respect, and his speed haunted her. Not him, she whispered again, almost to herself. But this time the words held less fear and more uncertainty. Who was this human really? And why did her heart feel unsettled? In the quiet of the night, the princess realized something she could not yet name. The human warrior had entered her world, not as a destroyer, not as a threat, but as a challenge to her beliefs, her fears, and perhaps even her heart. And Auralia knew deep down that the real story was only beginning. The morning light filtered through the tall crystal windows of the palace, casting rainbow patterns on the floor. Princess Auralia sat quietly in her private garden, a place few could enter. Exotic alien flowers glowed softly, their scents drifting in the still air. Normally, this garden brought her peace, but today her mind was restless, filled with the memory of the human warrior Kale. Her father had called her again. This time it was not a ceremony or a formal gathering. She was to meet Kale in a private setting, under the Emperor's watch. Auralia's stomach tightened. She had thought seeing him once was enough, but now she had to speak with him, to face him. When she entered the garden, Kale was already there, standing near a small fountain. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, sharp and observing, tracked her every movement. He did not bow or kneel this time. He simply waited calmly, as if expecting her. "Princess Auralia," he said softly, his voice carrying over the gentle sound of water. "It is good to meet you again in a quieter place." Auralia hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the walkway. She studied him. He looked human, yes, but he carried a presence she could not ignore. Strong, calm, and yet careful. Nothing like the humans of her memories. I do not understand," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "Why are you here? Why did Father call you to our palace?" Kale inclined his head. "I am here because your father asked me. I come with respect, not for battle or conquest. My duty is to offer aid if needed and to learn about your people. I do not wish to cause fear." Auralia's mind raced. Aid? Learn? Humans, in her experience, destroyed without thought. And yet this human spoke calmly, politely. Something about him made her pause. She wanted to speak, to demand proof of his intentions, but words stuck in her throat. The garden was quiet for a moment, broken only by the soft trickle of the fountain. Finally, she asked, "You claim to help. But humans are dangerous. I have seen it with my own eyes. How can I trust you?" Kale looked at her directly. His gaze was steady, not threatening. "Trust is not given blindly, Princess. It is earned. I do not expect you to trust me immediately, but I can show you my actions if you allow it." Auralia felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, curiosity. Perhaps it was the way he spoke, or the calm certainty in his movements. She wanted to believe him, Yet fear clung to her like a shadow. Before she could respond, a sudden noise erupted from the far end of the garden. A security drone patrolling the palace grounds had malfunctioned. Sparks flew from its sensors as it tilted dangerously toward a cluster of glowing flowers. Kale reacted instantly. In a blur of motion, he leapt forward, catching the drone before it crashed into the plants. His hands moved with precise control, disarming the device without a single misstep. Auralia watched, stunned. She had never seen anyone move with such speed and care. "You..." she began, but no words came. Her fear was mixed with astonishment. The human was not reckless or violent. He was careful, protective, even considerate. Kale turned to her with a small smile. "It is safe now. Your garden is unharmed." Auralia's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him she did not need saving, and yet she could not deny the truth. He had acted without hesitation, without harm. A human, acting with care. For the next hour they walked through the garden. Kale asked questions, simple ones at first, about the plants, the weather, the architecture of the palace. Auralia answered cautiously, still wary. She noticed how he listened, truly listened instead of just waiting to speak. "You have a beautiful home," Kale said finally, pausing near a glowing water lily. "Your people have built something remarkable." Auralia's lips parted in surprise. He did not insult, he did not compare, he did not mock. He simply observed and appreciated. Something inside her shifted. Perhaps humans could see beauty where others did not, but the peace did not last long. From the palace corridors, a warning alarm blared. Auralia's heart skipped a beat. Someone had breached the lower security levels. Saboteurs. The palace had been targeted before, though the Emperor rarely mentioned it. Kyle's expression changed immediately. Calm became focus, and focus became action. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I will check." "I need you safe." "No," Auralia cried, stepping forward. "I am not a child, I can—" Kyle shook his head gently. "Not this time. Please stay here. You will not be harmed if you follow my instructions." She hesitated, fear and pride warring inside her. Finally, she stepped back behind a tall flowering bush, her silver hair brushing against the petals. She watched as Kyle moved toward the palace corridor. His speed and grace were like nothing she had seen. He was strong but careful, every step measured. From her hiding place, Auralia could see the saboteurs. They were aliens from another faction, cloaked and armed with strange devices. They moved with precision, aiming for the palace control systems. Without Kale, Auralia knew the situation could have been disastrous. But Kale did not charge recklessly. He assessed, planned, and acted. With swift, controlled movements, he disarmed them one by one, using their own momentum against them. The saboteurs were skilled, but Kale was better, faster, smarter, and careful. Finally, the last saboteur fell, immobilized but unharmed. Kale turned and gestured toward the princess. "It is safe now," he said. His voice carried the same calm assurance as before. Auralia stepped forward slowly. Her fear was still there, but it had changed. Now it mixed with something new. Respect. You saved the palace," she whispered. Without harming anyone." Kale inclined his head. "A warrior protects. That is my duty. Violence is a tool, not a goal." Auralia's mind whirled. She had spent years fearing humans as destroyers, but Kale had shown her another side. A human could be strong and careful, powerful yet honorable, brave yet compassionate. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the garden. Auralia felt the warmth on her face, but it could not compare to the warmth stirring in her chest. She did not fully trust Kale yet. How could she after all she had seen? But she felt something important had shifted. Fear was no longer the only emotion she felt toward him. "Why do you help us?" she asked finally. Kale's eyes softened. "Because I can. Because it is right. And because sometimes helping others teaches us more about ourselves than we ever expected." Auralia nodded slowly, not fully understanding, yet feeling the truth in his words. Perhaps humans were not the mindless threats she had imagined. Perhaps they could be allies, even friends. The Emperor's voice echoed in her mind. Kyle had been sent as an ally, but Auralia knew now that his presence was more than that. It was a challenge not of battle, but of belief. A challenge to see humans as something more than fear. As the day passed, Auralia and Kale spoke more. She began to ask questions about human worlds, about battles he had fought, about what drove him. Kyle answered honestly, never boasting, never exaggerating, Each answer revealed intelligence, courage, and honor. By the time the sun set, Auralia realized she had spent hours with a human and survived without harm. More than that, she had begun to see the world differently. Humans were not monsters. They could be fierce, yes, but also thoughtful, disciplined, and trustworthy. That evening, as the palace lights glimmered against the dark sky, Auralia returned to her chambers. She sat by the window looking out at the swirling gases of Zorath Prime. Her thoughts returned to Kale. She could not stop thinking about him, about how different he was from her expectations, about the courage and care he had shown. Not him, she whispered again, almost to herself. But this time the words carried no fear. They carried wonder. The human warrior had arrived, and Auralia, the alien princess, realized that her world and perhaps her heart would never be the same. Outside, the palace stood tall against the stars. Inside, Auralia stared into the night, knowing that the next steps would bring more challenges, more tests, and perhaps more truths about humans than she could ever imagine. And somewhere in the palace corridors, Kale prepared for what was to come, unaware that the alien princess he had saved was already beginning to see him as more than just a warrior. The night was quiet over the palace of Zorath Prime. The twin moons cast silver light across the spires, making the floating walkways glimmer like threads of glass. Princess Auralia could not sleep. Her mind kept returning to Kale, the human warrior, and the events of the day. He had saved her garden, protected the palace, and faced danger without hesitation. Yet more than that, he had done it with respect and care, things she had never associated with humans. A soft tapping at her door made her start. A servant entered quietly, bowing. "Princess, your father requests your presence." "There has been a disturbance in the lower sectors of the palace," the servant said carefully. Auralia's heart skipped a beat. Another disturbance? She remembered the saboteurs from earlier, and a cold fear ran through her. But Kale had already proven himself capable. Perhaps he could handle this as well. She walked to the observation deck above the palace's lower sectors. From here, she could see long corridors and the security doors that led to restricted areas. Normally, these sectors were calm at night, patrolled only lightly. But tonight something had moved, something the sensors had detected. Kale was already there. He stood near a corridor, scanning the readouts. His expression was calm but alert. The faint glow from the control panels reflected off his face, highlighting the sharp intelligence in his eyes. "Princess," he said without turning, "stay behind me. There may be intruders. I need you safe." Auralia swallowed. Fear still lingered, but she nodded. This time she did not argue. She had learned to trust him a little, even if her heart raced with uncertainty. Together they moved along the observation deck. Kale led the way, stepping with quiet confidence. Auralia followed, careful not to make a sound. The corridors below were dark and strange shadows danced along the walls. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the corridor, a humanoid silhouette, but its movements were too fast, too precise. Auralia's eyes widened. The intruder carried a strange device that emitted low pulses of energy. She could not tell what it was for, but instinct told her it was dangerous. Kale's voice was calm, steady, and commanding. "Hold here. Watch the door. If anything comes this way, stay hidden." He moved forward with deliberate steps. Auralia's heart pounded as she watched him approach the intruder. The being turned, revealing alien features, sharp eyes, armored skin, and a device that could disable the palace's systems if used. Kale did not attack immediately. He assessed, calculated, and acted with precision. In a swift, controlled motion, he disarmed the intruder without harming them. The alien fell to the floor, immobilized but alive. Auralia exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She had never seen such control. Humans, she had always believed, acted recklessly, relying on brute strength. But Kale moved like a predator and a protector at the same time, his actions guided by intelligence and care. Are you always like this?" she asked, stepping cautiously into the corridor. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried her astonishment. Kale looked at her and gave a small smile. "Not always. But I act to protect those who cannot defend themselves. That is what a warrior does." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask more about his past, his people, why he cared, but there was no time. More disturbances were appearing on the sensors. Kale gestured for her to stay back, then moved quickly through the corridors, disabling devices and subduing intruders one by one. Auralia watched in amazement. Each intruder was handled with care, each movement calculated and precise. No unnecessary force, no reckless attack, only efficiency and protection. And through it all, she began to feel something she had never felt about humans before: respect. After the threat was neutralized, Kyle returned to her side. His breathing was steady, his expression calm. Auralia realized she had expected exhaustion, perhaps even anger, but there was none. He was composed, ready for whatever came next. She began hesitating. You could have destroyed them easily. Why not? Kale looked at her, his gaze steady. Strength is not measured by how much you can break, Princess. It is measured by how well you control it. Violence is a tool, not a solution. There are always better ways than harm. Auralia's mind raced. Could humans really be like this? Could they really act with such discipline, even in danger? Her memories of fear, pain, and destruction were suddenly challenged by this single human. He was not a monster, he was something else. They returned to the observation deck, the corridors silent now except for the soft hum of security systems. Auralia realized she had been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her body ease, though her heart still raced. Thank you, she said quietly. It was simple, but she meant it. Not just for the protection, but for showing her something new. Something she had never imagined humans could possess: honor. Kale inclined his head. You are welcome, Princess. But remember, it is your world and your people. I am only here to help when needed. Auralia nodded, but she could not stop thinking. She had spent years fearing humans, believing them to be destroyers. And now one human had shown her care, intelligence, and courage. Could it be possible that her fear was misplaced? The next day, Kale requested to learn more about the palace and its systems. Auralia, though hesitant, agreed to show him. They moved together through the halls, discussing the security networks, patrols, and emergency protocols. Kale asked questions, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. He listened carefully to her answers, taking notes and sometimes nodding thoughtfully. You are very knowledgeable about this palace, Kale said. Most people take it for granted, but you understand it deeply. That is impressive. Auralia felt a small warmth in her chest. He was not mocking her. He was acknowledging her skill and intelligence. Humans could respect others even when they were different. She had never expected to see that. As they spoke, Kale shared stories from his own experiences, not tales of conquest or war, but of strategy, problem-solving, and protection. He spoke of worlds he had defended, not destroyed, and of people he had helped. Each story revealed discipline, intelligence, and compassion. Auralia listened, fascinated. She began to see a pattern. Humans were not mindless threats. They could be dangerous, yes, but also thoughtful, capable, and honorable, and Kale was the living example. By the end of the day, a new feeling had begun to grow in her chest. It was still mixed with fear, yes, but it was joined by respect and curiosity. She realized she wanted to understand him, to see more of what he could do, and perhaps even to trust him. As night fell again over the palace, Auralia stood by her window, looking out at the glowing gases of Zorath Prime. Kale had proven himself in ways no human or alien had before. She felt a quiet shift inside her. Fear was still there, but it was no longer the only force guiding her thoughts. Not him, she whispered again, almost to herself. But this time the words carried a different meaning. Not fear alone, not rejection, but challenge. She would face him again. She would watch. She would learn. And perhaps in time she would understand that humans could be more than what she had feared. They could be allies, protectors, and maybe even something more. The palace remained silent, but inside the princess, a storm of thoughts and emotions had begun. Kale, the human warrior, had not only survived the night's challenges, but he had also begun to change her world and her perception of humans forever. And deep inside, Auralia realized one truth she could not yet admit aloud. The human warrior had entered her life, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the palace was quiet, but an uneasy feeling hung in the air. Princess Auralia walked through the long corridors with Kale at her side. Today was different. Today they would leave the safety of the main palace and explore the lower sectors, areas few citizens ever saw. These sectors were old, filled with winding passageways and hidden rooms, many of which held archives and technology that controlled the palace. Auralia's hands gripped the railing of the elevated walkway as she followed Kale. Her heart was still cautious. She had begun to respect him, even trust him a little, but old fears lingered. Humans were strong, unpredictable, and unknown. Kyle had proven himself before, yet the thought of danger always made her stomach tighten. "Why do you want to see these areas?" she asked, glancing at him. Kale's expression was calm. "To understand the palace better. If something happens, I can protect it, and you. Knowledge is as important as strength." Auralia nodded slowly. His words made sense. Humans, she realized, did not rely solely on power. They planned, they observed, they adapted. These were qualities her people often underestimated. They moved through dimly lit hallways, the walls lined with glowing panels and shifting light streams. Auralia's eyes scanned the surroundings, alert for anything unusual. Kale's movements were precise, quiet, almost effortless. Even in these strange, shadowed corridors, he radiated control and confidence. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught their attention. One of the security panels was flashing red, an alert she had not seen before. Auralia frowned. "Something is wrong," she said. "This sector is normally quiet at night. Why is there a signal?" Kale crouched beside the panel, examining the readings. "Someone has tampered with the system. Not just a malfunction, this is deliberate." His voice was calm but serious. "We need to investigate." Auralia's pulse quickened. She had seen intruders before, but this felt different. The tampering was precise, targeted. Someone wanted to cause real harm to the palace. Together, they moved deeper into the lower sectors. The corridors narrowed, the walls darker and the air cooler. Strange machinery hummed softly and the shadows seemed alive. Auralia's fear returned, but she fought it. She would not run, not now. Not with Kale. As they turned a corner, they found themselves in a large chamber filled with alien technology, some devices humming with energy, others dark and dormant. At the far end, figures moved quickly, trying to bypass security locks. Saboteurs. Auralia's breath caught in her throat. Kyle stepped forward, placing himself between her and the intruders. "Stay behind me," he instructed. His voice was calm, commanding, yet not unkind. Auralia hesitated, but then nodded. She had learned that fighting him was pointless. He moved like water, smooth, unstoppable, and controlled. Watching him, she realized humans could be disciplined, precise, and intelligent in ways her people rarely imagined. The intruders noticed them and rushed forward, weapons drawn. But Kale did not panic. His movements were swift, deliberate. With a combination of speed, strength, and strategy, he disarmed the saboteurs, using their own momentum against them. Each strike was precise, none unnecessary, leaving the intruders immobilized but unharmed. Auralia could hardly breathe. She had never seen anyone move like this. The humans she remembered had destroyed without thought, killing everything in their path. Kale, however, acted with care. He was a warrior, yes, but also a protector. When the last intruder fell, Kale turned to Auralia. "It is safe now," he said. She stepped forward, voice shaking. You could have defeated them easily." "Why did you not?" Kyle smiled slightly. "Because victory is not in destroying, Princess. Victory is in control, in protecting what matters, in using strength wisely." Auralia's chest tightened. She realized that humans, at least this human, were not what she had always feared. They could be strong, intelligent, and honorable. She had spent years believing the opposite. They secured the chamber and returned to the main corridor. Auralia's mind raced. Kale had not only protected her and the palace, but he had done so with respect, discipline, and care. She felt a quiet admiration growing inside her, something new, something dangerous to admit. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly as they walked. Kale looked at her. "Because it is right. Because it is necessary. Because sometimes protecting others teaches us more about ourselves than we ever expected." Auralia thought about this. Her people often acted out of duty, fear, or pride. Kale acted out of principle. He did not seek glory, he did not seek reward. He acted because it was right. By the time they returned to the upper levels of the palace, Auralia felt a shift within herself. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. Respect had replaced some of it. Curiosity had joined the mix. And something deeper, perhaps admiration, was beginning to grow. As night fell again, Auralia stood by her window, looking out at the glowing gases of GalacticPrime. She could see the palace lights shimmering against the twin moons. Kale had proven himself time and again. He had faced danger, protected her, and done so with honor. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Not him, but this time, The words held a different weight. They were not only about fear. They carried curiosity, wonder, and even the faintest hint of trust. The next day, the Emperor called Auralia to his chambers. Kyle was present, standing quietly at the edge of the room. "Princess," the Emperor said, his voice calm but firm, "you have spent time with the human warrior. Tell me what you have learned." Auralia hesitated. The court watched silently. She had feared judgment, criticism, and perhaps anger. But she took a deep breath and spoke honestly. "Father, he is not what I expected," she said. "He is strong, yes, but also careful. He is intelligent, disciplined, and honorable. I have seen him face danger without harming unnecessarily. I trust him." A murmur ran through the court. Trust. From the princess. A human, it was unheard of. The Emperor nodded slowly. "Then you understand why he is here. Humans may be different, yes, but some can be allies, protectors, even friends. You have seen this firsthand." Auralia nodded, still processing her feelings. She could not deny the respect she felt for Kale. She could not deny the admiration that had begun to grow. Kale stepped forward slightly. "Princess, I do not expect you to change your beliefs entirely," he said softly. "I only hope you see that humans can act with care, intelligence, and honor. That is all I ask." Auralia met his gaze. For the first time, she saw not just the human warrior, but a person, a man of principle, strength, and courage. The palace remained calm, but Auralia knew this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more tests, and perhaps more truths about humans that she could not yet imagine. As she returned to her chambers that evening, she felt a quiet determination. Kale had entered her life, and he had changed it. Not through force, not through threat, but through courage, wisdom, and care. And deep inside, Auralia realized she wanted to see what came next. She wanted to understand humans, to see their strength and honor firsthand. And perhaps she wanted to see Kale again. Not just as a warrior, but as someone extraordinary in ways she had never expected. The palace of GalacticPrime shone under the light of the twin suns, its spires sparkling like crystals above the swirling clouds of gas. Princess Auralia stood on the balcony of her chambers, gazing at the horizon. Today, something in the air felt different. The palace, usually so safe, carried an undercurrent of tension. Her instincts told her danger was near. Kale approached silently. He had spent the night monitoring the palace defenses, preparing for any threat. His calm presence reassured her, but Auralia could feel her heart racing. Over the past days, she had learned to respect him, to trust him even. But trust did not erase fear completely. "Princess," Kale said softly, "I have received reports of movement near the outer perimeter. It seems the saboteurs have returned, stronger and more determined than before." Auralia turned to him, eyes wide. "Again, but we stopped them before. How can they come back so quickly?" Kale's expression was calm, almost thoughtful. "Some threats are persistent, and some are more prepared. This time, we will need to act carefully. Together." Her chest tightened, but she nodded. Together. She had learned that running was no longer an option. Kale had shown her the truth about humans. They could be strong, disciplined, and honorable. Now she would see it again. They moved through the palace corridors, quiet and alert. Kale's steps were measured, his gaze scanning every shadow. Auralia followed closely, her mind alert for any sign of danger. As they reached the lower levels, the alarms blared. The saboteurs had breached the outer security gates. Kale gestured for her to stay back. "Princess, stay near the center. I will handle the front lines. Watch carefully." Auralia hesitated. She had always been told humans were dangerous, that they destroyed everything in their path. But Kale had changed her mind. She wanted to watch, to see firsthand the courage and intelligence he displayed. The saboteurs rushed forward, armed with strange energy weapons. Kale met them calmly, moving with speed and precision. He disarmed one attacker by redirecting his momentum, then used a small device to neutralize the other's weapons without harming them. Auralia's eyes widened. Each movement was controlled, deliberate, and effective. This was not chaos. This was mastery. As Kale handled the attackers, Auralia realized something she had not before. He fought not to harm, but to protect. Every action had purpose. Every strike had meaning. Humans, she had feared, destroyed without thought. Kale was proof that this was not always true. The battle was intense but brief. Kale's strategy, combined with his skill, neutralized the saboteurs. They were captured and restrained, unable to continue their attack. The palace defenses, strengthened by Kyle's foresight, held firm. When the last intruder was secured, Kyle turned to Auralia. "It is safe now," he said. His voice was calm, even gentle, yet carried the weight of command. Auralia stepped forward, heart pounding. "Kale, you did it again. You protected us, without harming them unnecessarily." Kale nodded. "Strength is not about destruction. It is about control, responsibility, and protecting what matters. That is what a warrior truly is." Her chest tightened. She had spent years fearing humans, believing them to be monsters. And yet here he was, proof that humans could be brave, honorable, and wise. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of admiration, respect, and something more she could not name. The Emperor arrived shortly after, accompanied by his advisors. He surveyed the scene, his face calm but serious. "Princess Kyle," he said, "you have both handled this situation with courage and intelligence. The saboteurs are restrained and the palace is safe. Kale, your actions have proven invaluable." Kale inclined his head. "I only acted to protect, Emperor. That is all any warrior can do." Auralia's eyes met Kale's. She saw not just a warrior, but a person of principle, courage, and honor. Something inside her shifted. Fear, which had ruled her thoughts for so long, was replaced by admiration and trust. Later, in the quiet of the palace garden, Auralia walked beside Kyle. The air was still, the glowing plants casting soft light around them. She spoke carefully, unsure of her own words. "Kale, I was wrong. About humans. About you, I feared what I did not understand, but you have shown me something different. Something I never expected." Kale glanced at her, his expression unreadable but kind. "It is not unusual to fear what we do not understand. What matters is what we do after we learn. You chose to see the truth. That shows courage, Princess." Her lips parted slightly. She had learned to trust him, to respect him, and now she realized she wanted more. She wanted to understand humans. She wanted to understand him. Just then a messenger arrived, bowing low. "Princess, Emperor Veyron requests your presence in the throne room." Auralia nodded and followed Kale. The throne room was filled with the court and palace officials, all awaiting the outcome of the night's events. The Emperor sat tall on his throne, his eyes calm but commanding. "Princess," he began, "you have seen the human warrior in action. Tell us what you have learned." Auralia took a deep breath, steadying herself. She spoke with honesty, her voice clear. "Father, Kale is not what I feared. He is strong, yes, but careful. He is intelligent, disciplined, and honorable. He has protected this palace, its people, and me without unnecessary harm. I trust him." A hush fell over the court. Whispers spread among the nobles, some in surprise, others in admiration. A human earning trust from the princess was unprecedented. The Emperor nodded slowly. "Then it is clear. Humans may differ from us, yes, but they can be allies, protectors, and even friends. Kale, you have earned the trust of this court and the respect of the princess. For that we are grateful." Kale inclined his head. "Thank you, Emperor. I only seek to act with honor and to protect where I can." Auralia felt a quiet pride. She had faced her fear, observed Kale's actions, and learned the truth about humans. They were not always monsters. Some could be noble, disciplined, and brave. Kyle was the living example. After the ceremony, Auralia walked with Kyle through the palace gardens. The soft glow of the plants reflected off her silver hair. She spoke quietly, almost to herself, but Kyle heard. "I was wrong to fear you, and my people's fear of humans may also be wrong. You have shown me courage, wisdom, and care. I respect you." Kale smiled gently. "Respect is earned, Princess, and you have shown courage as well, by seeing the truth instead of fear." The two walked in silence for a moment, the air filled with unspoken understanding. Auralia realized that her life, her world, and her view of humans had changed forever. Fear had been replaced by trust, distrust had given way to admiration, and somewhere deep inside, a new bond was forming, one built on courage, respect, and the understanding that strength could be used wisely. As the sun set over Zorath Prime, casting golden light across the palace spires, Auralia felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. Kale had entered her world, faced danger, and earned her trust. She knew that this was only the beginning of their story. Together they could face challenges, protect the Empire, and perhaps even build a friendship and maybe more that transcended species and fear. And deep inside, she whispered once more, a quiet affirmation of what she now knew to be true. Not him, not a threat, but someone remarkable. Kale glanced at her, reading the meaning behind her words without needing explanation. Together they looked out over the palace and the glowing gases below. Their worlds were different, their cultures far apart. Yet a connection had formed, one that would shape the future of the Zetherian Empire and leave a mark across the stars. The human warrior had arrived. The alien princess had faced her fear, and in the quiet of the palace a new trust, respect, and understanding had been born. The galaxy would take notice, but for now, the palace remained calm. And for Aralia, Kale, and the people of Zorath Prime, a new chapter had begun, one filled with courage, honor, and the extraordinary bond between two very different worlds.